The sun went down on me. Last one. Financial boundary violation. This happens just by the nature of it. This happens less with children, but I have quite a good example for it that actually ingrained a trauma imprint in me that is still impacting my relationship with money and my financial situation. So story time. When I was, I don't know, maybe 7, 8, 9, something like that, I used to have a shop at home, a candy store at home. I would have 2 desks and I would turn those desks around. I create a little space behind them. So I would create a counter out of my desks. I would buy a bunch of candy at the local candy store and not eat them, which for a child is a massive undertaking. And I would use them and display those candies at home as my own candy store. And I was obsessed with the idea of being able to sell my own things. Just this business mindset. I was so fascinated with it. And I think because of the negative response from my parents, I was so put off that I didn't pursue any business adventure. And still to this day, I struggle with having to trade my time for money instead of being able to set up a business that would work for me. So it is still an ongoing relationship where I felt like my boundaries were crossed in a way that is still impacting my relationship with my financial life. So I would sell these candies for cents. And I would charge a price. And my father, I specifically remember my father, I don't remember doing it with my mother. My mother and I didn't have a good relationship by then. But with my father, I would give him the candy. And obviously he doesn't like it. He doesn't want it. So it's not like he takes it and doesn't pay for it. He doesn't take it. He pretends that he takes it and then he gives it back to me. That's not the important part. The important part is the money part. He doesn't even pretend to pay for it. There's just this complete neglect. I offered a financial agreement. I made a financial term, and he completely neglected my terms. And I remember that I was having this little checkbook, this little notebook for myself where I was just marking up every single item so he owes me 2 cents, 1 cent, 3 cents. And I was just having these pages and pages of how much he owes me for the candy that he doesn't take. But fuck it, it's cents, it's pennies, it's nothing. Absolute fuck all that you could have just pretended to pay. With just fucking pretend that you're paying for it. Nothing, just complete neglect. And I would flip through this notebook at some point, and I have a vivid memory of looking at those numbers and realizing that he's never going to pay me. It's not a debt that I'm marking up and at some point he's going to come and I get to cash it all in. I'm never getting paid. And that thought lodged itself into my nervous system in a way that I cannot mark up my own price. I cannot set price for my time, my own value, my product, my services. I'm not in charge of my own financial situation, even if I have something to give, even if I have something to sell. And I know that it's a valuable thing. I paid for it, and I charged way less than what I've paid for the candy. It's not even that I did a markup on it and it was out of line. I sold and resold. I was quite a poor business person. I resold my product for a fraction of the price that I was buying it for. And they didn't even respect that price. And it just imprinted in my nervous system that I'm not in charge of my financial life, my financial situation. And I felt like that. I felt devalued. I felt underpaid. I felt constantly that I would have to sacrifice my time, my talent for peanuts or for absolutely nothing. This bullshit of working for credit. I love you. I appreciate you. If you're a friend of mine, anytime, I'm going to be there. Just don't, if you want to ask me, ask me. If you're a stranger, you got to pay me. I'm so sorry. I don't do pro bono anymore. That is just not the person that I am. I think it's extremely disrespectful not to pay strangers. You don't have to do what you're doing if you cannot pay for it. If it's friends coming together, gorgeous. Absolute lovely time. If it's professionals coming together, it's a boundary violation and it's fucking disrespectful not to pay people. And I'm very serious about the idea that I genuinely believe that we should have some form of regulation around having to have the money to make a film. I'm only talking about the film industry because this is my industry. I have nothing to do with other industries, but I'm pretty sure that a similar reform is needed in many other fields, especially creative fields. I firmly believe that in film, there should be some form of a regulation, especially on a larger budget, where you would have to prove that you have the money before you're hiring people, before you go into production. You have to have the financial backing, and it exists on larger level, but there is this indie murky ground where people just can be screwed over on the promise of being paid. Bullshit. There has to be some form of regulation, an external regulation and also an internal regulation, where you just don't employ people without paying them. You can ask for favors. You can ask a friend. Totally okay. But you should not be allowed to employ strangers and make them work for free for you. We should eradicate that culture, because there's more than enough money going around in the film industry, in the world in general, and we should not play cheap with each other and not devalue each other as human beings. Rent over. Another form of financial boundary violation would be any form of freeloading, any form of leeching on another person, when you just keep asking for favors and you just keep taking and taking and taking and taking and never getting anything back, never giving anything back. In a parent-child relationship, it's pretty much the opposite, because kids usually don't have any money until quite later on. So it doesn't quite apply to that parent-child relationship. It's quite the inversion of it. And parents sometimes have this, so that's how I would turn it around, that parents sometimes have this expectation that in adult years or in their later years, the child would take care of them. Sometimes financially, sometimes they turn it around and I paid for everything. I took care of you. So now when I physically break down, or I need assistance, or I need support, or I need help, or I just feel lonely, now you're obligated to take care of me because I took care of you. Now, my parents could very well make this argument, and I do the counter argument where it's like they financially, both of them, we never had an abundant household. My parents, shit you not, my mother, so my parents' household income would be something like double of that, but my father made a little bit less than my mother. My mother made, for as long as I've known her, the equivalent of something like 120 pounds a month. I'll let that sink in. Different economy, different country, 120 pounds a month. In the 90s, not in the 60s, in the 90s. Different country, different circumstances. I'm not saying we were starving. We never did. We were a working class family. But it was absolutely peanuts. We didn't have any luxury. We didn't spend on anything. We never went to a holiday. We never spent on anything that was out of line. So I grew up with that sense of, we just don't have it. And still, there was always food on the table. I was always able to wear clothes. I always had books for school. So the basics were always covered. You know, we weren't relying on any form of government help. We weren't using any form of aids, nothing. It was just that in those circumstances, we had the bare minimum and nothing else. So my parents could fairly say that they financially took care of me. And I layer it on top that, yes, that you managed to keep a child alive, but the amount of emotional damage, physical damage, mental damage that was happening in that household, the amount of therapy that I still need, like some 12 years down the line after I left, is a clear-cut sign for me that I don't owe anything to those two people. So when my mother turns around, sometimes my father as well, but my mother turns around, that who's going to take care of me when I grow old? Who didn't take care of me when I was young? So it can be a form of financial boundary violation as well, where they use payment, they use gifts, they use financial security or safety as a literal transactional agreement, and they expect something in return. And you shouldn't feel obligated, no matter how much they've spent on you. They paid for your college education, great, lovely, very well. They shouldn't expect anything in return, because that is the healthy flow of love, care, attention, that parents take care of their children for as long as they are categorized as children, for as long as they are not capable of taking care of themselves. And if anybody draws out the card that I gave you life, the very standard response is that I didn't ask for it. And we're going into more spiritual territories here, with souls agreeing with each other to have this experience together, which I still have an issue with. But nobody should ever use financial services in exchange for anything: affection, love, care, anything. That's my 2 cents. And I really hope that being able to recognize and categorize situations and environments, relationships of boundary violation, you would be able to start investigating where you in your behavior are exhibiting signs of your own violated boundaries, where you didn't feel safe, you didn't feel secure, you didn't feel a healthy sense of self, you didn't feel autonomy, you didn't feel the agency to be who you want to be and express yourself the way you want to express and feel the things that are present in your body. If at any point, if in any form, you felt like you have to minimize yourself and hide and disconnect even from your own body, from your own psyche, from your own emotions, those were clear-cut signs of boundary violation. And I would love for you to start investigating in order to have healthy, intimate relationships, both in personal and professional life. Much love.